Many people don't understand why alignment exists in Dungeons & Dragons. These days, I don't use it. I run games either for people that I know, or I run public games under a fairly restrictive rubric. But I think I have a pretty good understanding as to why alignment was originally included. Without context, it does seem to be horrifically restrictive and weird. In early D&D, the alignments were made tangible in the universe by having them be reflected and embodied in different planes, etc., etc., etc. It was all inspired by high fantasy authors. And if you want to know what inspired those authors, please refer to Manichaeism from the 3rd century. And you can go back further to Zhao Yang in 305 BC. But I don't believe that philosophy and world building were the sole reasons why alignment was inserted into the game. Was it about pushing people towards narrow perspectives? Yes, partially true, it was. It was about narrow perspectives because having any perspective into role-playing is literally the first step into having a wider view and understanding it. In 2006, Gygax specifically stated that the 9 alignment system was to enable the DM to roleplay monsters encountered by the player party and to judge players' manner of enacting the role of their separate PCs. And it was for the players to more easily determine the nature of and properly play their characters. It's like in the level 1 of improv, the rule is yes and. Then it progresses to if this thing is true, then what else is true? And then on to more advanced stuff like Crow. And then eventually, a person who's never studied acting or performance starts to understand the basic concepts behind acting. Cast your gaze back to the years of the 70s and the 80s, and for rural people like me, the 90s and the 2000s. While there was a solid contingent of theater kids that Gary Gygax referenced from the beginning, the vast majority of the player base was a bunch of wargamers. And back then, wargames weren't even fun. They had female Space Marines back then. Gross. There wasn't the easy access to simple tools like improv classes. Unless you were a theater kid, the idea of playing a character was probably pretty confusing. People claim that even little kids can roleplay, but the sort of play acting that little kids do is based on mimicry mostly. So you had a large group of people who needed a starting point. If you were to design something like that in tabletop terms, even in the year 2025, then you would probably still end up with something like alignment. I personally think that the main function of alignment back then was to simply give some sort of guide to clueless players and to keep a bunch of players in line. Remember, the alignment system used to have massive mechanical functions in the game. In other words, codification of role-playing. So even the most oblivious of player would understand if they played a good character, they couldn't just kill or steal everything. Popular YouTuber Pointy Hat made some excellent points in his video. But I would like to add, the idea that the alignment system gives more excuses to an antisocial player. Here's the thing, you can nitpick, and yes, obviously, alignment does give power to antisocial players and antisocial DMs. That's very true. I could point out literally any number of codified systems in role-playing that can easily be more exploitable than alignment. Basic world-building tools can be used by DMs to make players miserable. That's happened to me in the past. I had my player character demeaned utterly in a game, and the DM managed to do that using nothing but like basic role-playing and NPC dialogue. Correlation, not causation! Here's how I've seen this play through in the real world of gaming. I have a specific example at a convention of another DM who tried to run a game, and one young teenage player would just keep on casting fire spells throughout the intro to the game, just because they could. Whenever I run a game with strangers, I always spell out that you have to run a character who is willing and able to work with others, because your character, and by direct consequence, you cannot participate in the dungeon crawl unless you don't fall into those rules. Would having an alignment system solve the issue of the teenage girl who wanted to fireball everything? No. But having the dreaded chaotic neutral or chaotic evil in the player's description would have at least warned the DM about what was going to happen. And maybe instead of having a paragraph describing what kind of players to bring to the game, they could have just limited the alignment. And in D&D Basic, it spells out that a character's alignment does not mean that that character has to do stupid things. Pointy Hat's video claiming that somehow limiting alignment has cut down on bad behavior by players and DMs just doesn't jive with my real-world experience. There are still just as many bad DMs and players out there, probably a few more, but there are way more new players and DMs who are familiar with the basics of roleplay and aren't massive jerks because they approached a culturally popular hobby with good intentions. With good and healthy intentions for the most part. Though I'm basing that on in-person interactions mostly, not online stuff. If you want to talk about exploiting systems to be a jerk, we can definitely talk about Unearthed Arcana. There's definitely a reason why literally my first rule of online games is that no homebrew, no Unearthed Arcana. I don't think alignment was ever a significant source of problems. It just sort of was an imperfect fix-all, and over time a fix-all fixes nothing. So alignment's kind of there as this weird artifact in D&D, and you don't have to use it. Again, I don't, but you gotta use something as a replacement for that one purpose, because there's still a lot of people out there who want to play D&D but lack any sort of real starting point. Because maybe they're just not familiar with role-playing, or role assumption, as Gary Gygax would say. If I had to run a game for a bunch of badly socialized young people, I might still consider using alignment. But now D&D has a lot of podcasts, and pretty much every book lays out the bare bones of decent player and DM behavior. I think my paragraph that I write about my dungeon crawls probably is a better solution than alignment. But it's an ever-evolving game, so I'm always looking forward to the next, even better solution. So moral relativism aside, do any of you guys still use alignment in your games? If so, how do you use it? Was it really just this fascistic tool to grind people into submission? Was it a really simplistic and horrific thing? Or maybe it was just a misunderstood little solution there for people who didn't understand how to roleplay their orc. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Ah yes, another dumb niche video that nobody's going to be interested in watching. Well, if you have any ideas for my next video, also let me know in the comments below. Or stop by the Discord and share your thoughts, please. I am toying around with the idea of becoming a paid DM, going undercover in some of the websites and seeing what happens when I run a game for free and then run a game where each player has to pay me $5. And I'm also considering doing some vertical video streaming here because that seems to be the thing that YouTube wants to promote. I've seen some just weird stuff come up where it's just like, I can't believe that YouTube is promoting this garbage stream, and yet they are. So maybe if I do a stream on this channel, YouTube will promote that as well. Who knows? Anyways, have a good one.